It was a decision prompted by, quote, extraordinary circumstances. That is how Attorney General Merrick Garland is describing the appointment of Jack Smith, a former war crimes prosecutor and registered independent, to be the special counsel to oversee two criminal probes involving former President Donald Trump, both the investigation into sensitive government documents found at Mar-a-Lago as well as Trump's actions surrounding the January 6th attack. Garland says the appointment was necessary now that Trump is a 2024 presidential candidate, and President Joe Biden says he also intends to run for re-election. Trump's lawyers have been dreading the prospect of a special counsel announcement, and the former president quickly seized on the opportunity to publicly bash the move.
This horrendous abuse of power is the latest in a long series of witch hunts. They want to do bad things to the greatest movement in the history of our country, but in particular, bad things to me.
And joining me now is CNN contributor and Nixon White House counsel John Dean and CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. He's also the author of the book, The Threat, How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump. Andrew, let me go to you first. What's your reaction to what Trump is saying about the Justice Department? I guess this is to be expected, and it's why Smith better have some thick skin.
Yeah. Buckle in, Jim, and buckle in, Mr. Smith, because they can expect a steady diet of this for the extent of his tenure as special counsel. We'd like to believe that appointing a special counsel somehow insulates the investigation from accusations of partisanship. That is not the case. We know that from watching the experience that Robert Mueller had. However, that doesn't mean it's the wrong decision to appoint one. There are no hard rules or policies or laws that demand the appointment of the special counsel here. It's up to the Attorney General. He's obviously taken a look at the situation and assessed that the obvious concerns of conflict of interest now that Trump is a candidate make it the most prudent thing to do to appoint a special counsel. I completely agree with his decision, but I hope that Mr. Smith is bringing some thick skin to the job.
And John, what do you think? Do you think Merrick Garland needed to do this?
Well, they're certainly within the regulations what he has done, and the extraordinary circumstances. I don't think we have the full understanding of what he sees in his vision. For example, we're all aware that he's looking at Trump. Is he also looking at members of Congress who may have been integral in the January 6th episode? So that's one of the things I thought about when I read his order appointing Jack Smith. I think it could be a much broader investigation than people perceive. It's just not somebody who's been placed on the president to chase him or the former president, but rather to look at the entire situation. Interference with the certification is very broad. More focused, of course, is the second investigation or the other investigation into the document mistreatment by the former president.
Yeah, and Andrew, speaking of that, Trump's former Attorney General Bill Barr spoke about the federal investigation into that handling of those documents. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Is there ever a circumstance where you think is appropriate to indict a former president?
Oh, yes. If a former president commits a crime, especially a serious crime, they should be indicted for it. If the Department of Justice can show that these were indeed very sensitive documents, which I think they probably were, and also show that the president consciously was involved in misleading the department, deceiving the government, and playing games after he had received the subpoena for the documents, those are serious charges.
That's a serious enough
serious.
Crime. That's a serious enough crime.
Well, I said that I personally think that they probably have the basis for legitimately indicting the president. I don't know. I'm speculating.
You're speculating. Yeah.
But given what's gone on, I think they probably have the evidence that would check the box. They have the case.
And Andrew, in the previous hour, we asked the former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales essentially the same thing, and he said that there might be a case there with the document case when it comes to whether to indict the former president. What do you make of these comments?
Well, Jim, both former attorneys general are simply doing the math that all of us have done over the last several months, certainly since the search warrant in August. simply from the information that's widely known to everyone, what's been reported in the press and what the government has revealed in their numerous court filings in the fight over this information after the search warrant, we know that they have a lot of very serious information that indicates a strong and sound basis to bring charges. Now, that doesn't mean that charges will be brought. They could also be aware of all sorts of other things that are potential defenses or problems with that evidence that we're not aware of. So clearly DOJ still has a decision to make, but based on what we know from what is already in the public record, this is a case that is far beyond, I would say, far beyond the halfway point. And let's think about that as compared to the job that Special Counsel Mueller walked into. When my colleagues and I pushed then acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to appoint the special counsel. At that moment, we were at the very beginning of a broad scope investigation into potential foreign influence. So Mueller was brought in and essentially told, determine if this happened, and if so, should charges be brought. With respect to the Mar-a-Lago case, we know what happened. We know a lot of what happened, and we know that based on what we're aware of, there could very well be an indictment in this case.
And John, we should point out that a key difference between these investigations and the Mueller probe is that the former president is now out of government with no power over the special counsel. He can't threaten to fire him. But what about what Andrew was just saying there a few moments ago, that this does not look very good for the former president, that it appears that this investigation has traveled a pretty long distance?
Well, certainly the documents case is not a difficult case. There are lots of precedents to prosecute in these circumstances. A group at the Brookings Institute of former federal prosecutors and some defense attorneys went through all of the existing record of prosecutions of these types of cases and found plenty of precedent where Trump is actually one of the more egregious based on the facts we know. And no one knows of any mitigating facts. And there has been litigation on this in a Florida court where the president has tried to dance around a little bit on the fact that he got a subpoena served on him that uncovered a lot of his misbehavior. And that is indeed the record that Jack Smith will pick up and pursue. And I don't think it'll be very long until he makes a decision one way or the other. And I don't suspect it's going to be a decision Mr. Trump is happy with.
All right, John Dean, Andrew McCabe, thank you very much. We'll stay on top of it. I appreciate the time.